Hello, my name is Jamie Clark, and you are listening to the SWOT analysis for the company Headspace. First, I'll share a little bit of background about the company Headspace. So, Headspace was founded in 2010 by Andy Puddicombe, who was interestingly a former Buddhist monk. And if you know anything about those, they spend a big chunk of their life practicing meditation and really controlling their breath. And so he started studying marketing and new brand development, and then in 2010 launched this digital health application that is designed to teach users the art of medication and how to deal with stress. It is an app that is in the Android platforms and Apple platforms, and it has an interesting freemium platform where users can access 10 days of free content, after which they have the option to take out a monthly or annual subscription or continue the free trial with limited material. The company started seeing a lot of exponential growth in the recent years after they went through a few fundraising rounds, and then of course through the pandemic there's been heightened awareness around mindfulness and well-being, and so now they are at a valuation of about $3 billion, with their annual revenue at around $70 million. Before we dive in to Headspace's SWOT analysis, I wanted to quickly highlight the difference between strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. So strengths and weaknesses are often considered internal and controlled factors compared to opportunities and threats, which are often referred to as external forces, market changes, or industry positives or negatives. Headspace has a lot of strengths. I'll start with their brand recognition. First, they have some great media presence. They signed a 3-series deal with Netflix that was produced by Vox Media. They have been featured on both UK and US television shows, including The Today Show, The Dr. Oz Show. They've been in multiple print media publications such as Martha Stewart. And their CEO is a great public speaker and has done several TED Talks and has presented himself on several outlets talking about the science and benefits to a meditation practice. The next strength is their first to market play. So they are a beautifully designed app, and since they have been founded in 2010, they have had that advantage over some of their competitors that they have just been around longer, and they have that rooted in science focus on meditation and wellness strategy that says they're not just reacting to, let's say, the pandemic, but they really do believe in the benefits of mindfulness and meditation. The next strength is that they are evidence-based and medicine-backed. So this means that they are partnering with many research studies to prove out their benefits of meditation and how it is comparable to other in-person therapies. They have 27 published papers and studies, several white papers, and they're currently involved in 51 studies throughout the US. Another strength is how they are very user designed and user friendly. Their onboarding experience after you download the app is very intuitive, and it really captures the audience and allows them to explore all of the features on their own, and does not necessarily need a module explaining how to go through the platform or any type of training. And the last is affordability. With their strategy of the freemium platform where users can have access to limited content and really test out the different modules and features of the platform, it really is a great way to get people used to and understanding the value of meditation and wellness. And then it also gamifies so that as you continue to practice and as you continue to listen and learn on the app, you can unlock other premium features. So overall, Headspace is positioned really nicely within their strengths. Next, I will cover some weaknesses of Headspace. The first is they're experiencing rising costs. As inflation goes up and the cost of operating goes up, it is usually more expensive to produce services like this on top of monthly subscriptions of wellness apps and other type applications like this are usually the first thing that people cut out of their budget. And especially if they have to increase their cost to pay for labor or services or run the company, that cost often gets pushed on the consumer. And at this point, it is something that they're battling with that they simply just cannot do. The next is the expensive and limited talent pool, which kind of relates back to that rising cost point. Mindfulness coaches, therapists, counselors, and voice actors are all expensive skills and charge a very high hourly rate. And so those costs are having to be pushed down to someone. The third is they have a lacking marketing strategy. For example, they do not target specific audiences or populations. They are very one size fits all in that meditation is good for anybody. And so it's hard to have a strong presence and influence brand loyalty when they are targeting so many people at once. The fourth is their unclear differentiation. As the rise of wellness applications and other well-being and mindfulness products are on the market, they are having a hard time finding their niche to zoom in on and focus and really capture that market. And the last is how a research process takes so much time and effort. So since they are rooted in science and really evidence-based, clinical trials and studies can take months, sometimes years to complete and validate and peer review, which can slow down marketing and sales strategies, not to mention it influences just their overall business strategy as they're trying to execute. Next, I'm going to cover a few of Headspace's market opportunities. The first, rising consumer interest. It's been about a decade, but as we see time go by, more and more consumers are interested in this concept of health and well-being, meditation, and mental health, and there's less of a stigma around being conscious about the state of your mental health. Especially during the pandemic, consumers are looking for new, easy, and affordable ways to manage those. The second is corporation well-being initiatives. So during a Great Resignation, obviously companies are setting aside pretty big budgets for wellness initiatives, and there's a huge opportunity to start to target corporations for their wellness portfolio and to go B2B opposed to direct to consumer. The third is how there are some relaxing government regulations around receiving care in digital health mediums. This isn't necessarily something that will directly impact Headspace, but as the world of virtual care and telehealth visits are starting to open up and are starting to be reimbursable, this is something that Headspace could potentially seize upon if they wanted to actually start delivering care via live video visits. And the fourth, funding and research. So there is an unprecedented amount of funding coming from all over the country and all different industries. Many VC firms, private equity firms are backing well-being and wellness initiatives and startups, and there is a lot of money out there that can be funded via just grant proposals if you wanted to take the research angle. So there is a lot of opportunity to start to build out their proof points and grow their business. And finally, I will cover the threats that Headspace is facing. The first being increased competition in the market. So as I mentioned on the previous slide, with the emphasis and focus on mental health and well-being, the market is ripe for new entrants, and therefore competitors are gaining more traction, funding, and attention because of all of the awareness around this market. And so competitors such as Calm, Shine, Lyra Health is another one, are directly competing with Headspace. The next is that established companies are starting to move into this space. So this is a little bit different than startups building the business from scratch, but rather other types of companies are noticing that well-being and mindfulness is a semi-easy market to move into, and so if they could expand their business to be into that, they could also capture that market share. So we're seeing different applications starting to offer meditations. There are gyms moving into this space, libraries moving into the wellness space, and so Headspace is seeing competition coming from multiple angles. The third is overlapping of features with other companies. So this is similar to my previous point, but large companies that have a much broader scope than just meditation or mindfulness are easily adding these features. So we're seeing current counseling or therapy applications that previously did not include meditation guides are now starting to offer those. We're even seeing healthcare providers, clinics, and physicians, and they are starting to recommend meditation and wellness and well-being within their practices. And so if they have a preferred application that they use, that is just contributing to the competition in the market. And lastly, there are starting to be different delivery methods emerging to battle this mental health crisis that we're seeing. So consumers are exploring new ways to manage their mental health. There, besides exercise and all of these other ways to manage, there are starting to be deployments of different types of technologies, full immersion. We're seeing VR, virtual reality, starting to get into this space. And then even I mentioned before, the concept of in-person therapy is starting to lose its stigma that it's previously had over the past decade, and people are starting to embrace in-person therapy, which is now starting to directly compete. Overall, Headspace is positioned quite nicely to continue to grow and to continue to carve out their niche for their market share. A few recommendations for their continued strategy are to really focus on a target population. Zoom into a subset of people, for example, frontline nurses, for example, teachers, mothers. They could really target and expand their marketing in unsaturated areas. There are, of course, lots of saturated areas that talk about burnout in the workforce, but if they really did decide to focus on one market and capture it, they could see some strong differentiation. They need to start targeting B2B strategies and going after companies that are lacking in retention of their employees, so that, and offer this as a feature so that corporations can also be referred to as a employer of choice. It is often hard to capture market share if you are a direct-to-consumer, but if you develop an enterprise strategy, you can capture thousands of employees at once. And lastly, they should continue to prove out their evidence, continue to do research studies, and continue to prove out the value that meditation, well-being, and mindfulness can have for your mental state. And ultimately, the evidence will do its own job in proving that it is worth the cost. And then finally, they need to remain agile in this crazy market with market conditions shifting, consumer expectations and demands influencing startups like this. They need to be ready to identify new targets and capture, and if there is an emerging competitor, they need to be able to adjust their strategy quickly. Thank you so much for listening to my presentation. I hope you enjoyed.